So this is the Ming Chinese army. It's a big army because it's an inert general. You can see 4 commands. One of them is an ally, a Burmese ally. The command A is mostly CV, a mix of CVS and CVO. Command B is the artillery command. It's got 2 artillery O and 2 artillery I. You've got to have compulsory irregular CVI. They're not much use, but they do bulk the army up. Command C is its real strike command. It's got 11 regular light horse S who can be deadly against my knights. Final command, Command D, is the ally command. The key to that is the 2 Elephant S, one of them the general. That will scare any knights from attacking. The rest of it just bulks the army up and gives it some mass. So you can see at the 400 points it's only on 83 ME. That's because a lot of the CV and the light horse don't have very high ME for their point count. You can also see that it's taken feint flight, so that will be used with the light horse or the CV to get them out of trouble with my knights. The Navarrese army is one of the classic Book 4 armies. 4 commands. One of them an ally command, bringing the English along. The Bow S are excellent troops, and you dismount the knights to make them Blade S. So the English ally will be critical. You have a fantastic knight block with the irregular Knight S in Command A. However, they're very clumsy and will go impetuous. So the CNC is taking command of that in order to restrain them. The other 2 commands are quite similar. They have auxiliary S. Both of those are to use and deploy into terrain, and also provide some liquidity around the knights and flank protection, and keeping light horse at away from the knights. So the real strike arm is the knights. The English have the potential to cause trouble for any enemy, and the auxiliary S protect the flanks. Looking at the Ming army, the Navarrese thought the light horse S was the biggest threat, that everything else they could handle. The auxiliary would have to screen the very mobile CV and light horse in order to prevent them getting behind the clumsy knights. The Bow S would have to be the game winner, because even though the knights are very powerful, because they're clumsy and the Ming army has got some very mobile units, they probably won't be able to get into contact with a good charge. So unless they get really lucky in being set up at the moment when the inert general rolls a 1, they will probably not be able to get a decisive charge in, which means that the Bow S will be the game winners for the Navarrese. The only troops that the Ming has that counters them is their artillery, and those should be possible to dodge. Everything else the Bow S can take out. So the Navarrese are setting up on the far side, and the Chinese are setting up on the near side. The Navarrese setting up first. The Navarrese was the defender, and the terrain was set up like this. The Chinese picked 2 scrubby hills and a road, and the Navarrese picked a deep, narrow river in order to block the Chinese light horse, and also 2 rocky flats to give the elephant some trouble and provide a great vantage point for the archers to shoot from. The two scrubby hills from the Chinese ended up on the Navarrese side of the board, so they were pushed to the corners to stop them being useful. The rocky flats, particularly the one in the middle, was placed right in the middle of the combat area, so that will prove pretty significant in the fight. Here you can see the overall Navarrese who deployed first. They put their English into the rocky flat in the center, with the Navarrese javelinmen, auxiliary S, one on each flank. The knights they kept behind at the back, ready to go left or right, depending on where they could fit in a decisive charge against the Chinese. In response, the Chinese set up with their artillery in front of the English. Their artillery O is deadly to the English longbows. They set up their Burmese ally command in front of the rocky flat ground, ready to contest that. They set up their CV command on their left flank, where it could be flexible, it could be advanced forwards and threaten the auxiliary, or it could maneuver back round to the right. They set up their light horse S and Siloy on their extreme right in the rocky flat ground on the edge of their setup area. Navarrese right was set up between the river and the rough, straddling the road, so if necessary it can advance up the road at double speed. The Siloy from the right command are set up in the rough. They wouldn't last very long against the light horse and CV of the Ming Chinese in the open. Next to them are set up the English, with two ranks of bow S in the front and the blade tucked into behind, ready to deploy left or right as needed. The second auxiliary S command is set up on the Navarrese left in a straight line. This extends out to the edge of the setup area, preventing the Ming Chinese from rapidly outflanking, and also acts as a screen for the troops behind. The Spearo are not very useful because they are impetuous, so they are pointed to the side edge so they won't have to advance. The Bow O are also clumsy, so are left back as a fallback position because they won't be able to retreat from the front if they are threatened. The Chinese are set up on their left with two units march blocking to prevent the Navarrese coming forward quickly, and the rest deployed in column, ready to move down the road and across to the right-hand flank if they are needed there. The Burmese are deployed in two front lines of infantry, with Blade F in the front rank. The elephants are left behind, ready to follow the Norman Knights, whether they go left or right around the rocky flat. Significantly, the elephants count as rocky flat as difficult terrain, so they won't be very effective if they have to fight in the rocky flat. The Chinese center has the two artillery O in the middle. They will be able to snipe the English longbows at long range, with the two artillery I on either flank supporting in case they get attacked. Waiting behind is the CVI. They are not very effective troops because they're clumsy, but they will be able to protect the guns from auxiliary or Siloy who are attacking them. The final Ming Chinese command is set up in the rocky flat. There are 7 light horse S who are in an outflanking position. There are 2 ranks of Siloy who will be effective at defending the rocky flat, and some the additional light horse S. The Navarrese first turn, and the English are not unreliable. They roll a 5 for their pips, so they get a good move. The only command that is paralyzed is the left-hand Navarrese javelinmen, who only get 1 pip, so are unable to withdraw from their advanced position, even though they might get outflanked by the Chinese light horse. The Navarrese plan becomes clearer. They shift both their auxiliary and their knights up the road in order to attack the Chinese left flank, while the English move out of range of the artillery and out of arc, moving to take control of the rocky flat. Navarrese's plan is to contain the Chinese with the javelinmen and the English bowmen in the rocky flat, while bringing their other 2 commands around the Chinese left flank and then attack from the side, rolling up the Burmese and then the artillery. The Chinese respond. Their right flank light horse sets out on an outflanking move around the Navarrese javelinmen. They shift their elephants to the left from the Burmese in order to get them lined up against the Norman knights, and they advance their CV in order to march block and delay the Navarrese attack on that front. They also wheel their artillery in order to bring the English bowmen within the rocky flat under fire. Navarrese turn 2, and the English only get 1 pip, so all they can do is try to scurry out of the artillery arc of fire. On the right flank, both the auxiliary and the knights deploy into line. On the left flank, the javelinmen get enough pips to withdraw to prevent themselves being outflanked. Half go back towards the scrubby hill, and the other half head towards the rocky flat in order to start threatening the Chinese artillery. The Chinese commander-in-chief moves to join the guns and is able to use his pips in order to wield them again bringing the English bowmen into arc. The Burmese auxiliary are advanced in order to threaten the flank of the longbow, and the elephants are moved to bring them closer to the knights. Navarrese's turn, the right flank attack grinds forward slowly, with the auxiliary and the knights advancing. The English longbow scoot out of the way of the arc of the Chinese artillery and start to bring their fire to bear on the Burmese auxiliary. 1 unit of Navarrese javelinmen creeps into the edge of the rocky flat, looking to advance and threaten the Chinese artillery. The English shooting is not that successful yet, just causing some Navarrese javelinmen to retreat, but the cumulative impact of that fire is what makes it very threatening. The Chinese advance their light horse in order to threaten the auxiliary moving into the rocky flat and protect the guns. Their cavalry deploys out wide. With an inert army, when a command rolls a 1, it becomes a 0. So here you can see both the Burmese command and the artillery command having 0 pips to move. English shooting still not producing results, but eventually low numbers will be rolled and they will start killing units. A good pip roll means the Navarrese are able to pull their infantry back to the scrubby flank on their left flank. They push also some units forward to threaten an attack on the Chinese artillery. Their longbows are still hiding from the arc of the artillery and straighten up in order to bring the main line of the Burmese under fire. They don't get the pips to enable the knights and auxiliary to press the attack. One of the disadvantages of an irregular command structure is that each command rolls its own dice for pips, which means that you cannot predictably attack with one command as the high pip dice, the way a regular generals can. The English Braid advance to protect the flank of the longbow, and they are going to be a very good matchup against the Burmese auxiliary O. But they are vulnerable to the Burmese elephants, so they stay on the edge of the rocky flat, which the elephants would count as difficult terrain. The Navarrese javelinmen are screening the knights behind them. That prevents the Chinese from charging the knights and then declaring a feigned flight and potentially breaking them up and forcing them to charge impetuously forwards. Turn 4, and the Chinese get great pips and take advantage of it to advance across the board. On the right, their Siloi move up out of the rough in order to threaten the Navarrese flank. Their light horse moves forward to protect the artillery. The artillery advances in order to bring the bowmen again within the artillery arc. All of the Burmese auxiliary step forward to the edge of the rocky flat, with the elephants maneuvering to line up against the knights, and the entire line of CV advances, preparing to charge the auxiliary of the Navarrese. Navarrese gets good pips for his auxiliary S commands, but unfortunately gets very little for his English. So he pushes forward in the attack on the artillery in the rough, but otherwise holds position. Finally, the sustained fire of the English longbows has produced a result with the kill of one auxiliary. That was on factors of 6 against 3. Chinese turn 5. Because the auxiliary have withdrawn to the scrubby hill, there is no chance of outflanking or threatening them further. So the Chinese light horse turns into column and advances towards the gap, supported by the Siloi coming out of the rocky flat in order to attack the same gap. On the left flank, the Chinese CV turns out to have been a feint when they advanced, and they pull back in order to bring the Navarrese auxiliary and knights forwards. Navarrese turn 6, and the Navarrese advance across the board. The auxiliaries in the rocky flat move to create a defense against the Siloi and the light horse of the Chinese, while one is in reach of an artillery and charges forward to encounter it. Next to the rocky flat, the bowmen continue their firing. The Blade S are advanced in order to start attacking the Chinese, who have one CV has moved forwards in order to stiffen the auxiliary, but it can be double overlapped in the attack. The auxiliary move forward and the knights move forward, keeping the pressure up on the Chinese CV. They will do well against the auxiliary, but they will be destroyed by the knights if they have to face a frontal charge without feigned flight. Chinese casualties start to mount. One of the Blade F is destroyed by bowfire. The artillery is killed in close combat by the auxiliary, and the CV that was protecting the auxiliaries is killed by a Blade S. Chinese turn 6, and with great pips the Chinese mount a counterattack against the auxiliary that killed the artillery, with both Chinese generals hard flanking the auxiliary. They pull back their artillery in order to prevent it being attacked by the Navarrese Siloi. The Burmese line extends, and the CV are moved into a solid line, turned about in order to face the javelinmen. As expected, hard flanked and attacked by two generals, the Navarrese auxiliary S is destroyed on the edge of the rocky flat. The Navarrese javelinmen come off the scrubby hill in order to threaten the flank of the Chinese attack. The English, now that the threat of the artillery O has been neutralized, advance in order to bring even more bow fire to bear on the Burmese. And on the extreme right flank, the Knights and the auxiliary advance. They are trying to set up a decisive charge against the Chinese CV. Successful shooting from the English sees another auxiliary O and blade F destroyed. Here you see the sub-general of the Navarrese. He is facing towards the river. That is because otherwise he would be impetuous, and the Navarrese would have to use pips every turn to stop him charging through his javelinmen in his command. Because he's facing sideways, he doesn't have to charge impetuously every turn. Chinese turn 7 and low pips from the two Chinese commands means that they cannot move two of their commands. The CV lines up, charges in on the auxiliary, and the CNC reserves pips for a feigned flight. The English, shooting at factor 6 because of their S, destroyed two more auxiliary I who were at a factor 2 because of their inferior quality. The charge of the CV is successful in breaking up the Navarrese line and pushing back various units that will make their feigned flight more effective. However, it doesn't kill any auxiliary in the first charge, but the cavalry will be able to get out of any retribution from the knights with their feigned flight. There we had to call time on our game. Chinese losses were a total of 6.5 ME, of which most of them were the Burmese Ally Command with 4.5 ME of losses, only half an ME of being disheartened. The Navarrese had only lost the one auxiliary S that attacked the artillery. Now, we always play what if when we finish a game to see what would have happened. In this game, the feigned flight would have drawn the Navarrese forwards, the auxiliary, and probably would have resulted in a couple of them being killed, but it would not have been decisive at breaking that command. The Burmese command is probably doomed. Faced up against bow S and blade S, it is likely that they will lose another unit very quickly, and then with the army disheartened, they are very vulnerable to bow fire, so they will probably break fairly soon, and the Chinese cavalry will probably withdraw in the face of the knights and pull round to try to defend the flank of their artillery. The Chinese attack on the rocky flat in the center. They do have the strength to take that with the Siloi that is coming up next to the regular light horse, but it will take them a very long time to break through against auxiliary S defending the rough. So thank you for watching. We will post more DBMM battle reports soon.